You are looking at something that is way overdue to make an appearance on the channel. This is our fancy 320. The only SIG part left on here is the fire control unit, but thanks to that fire control unit, we were able to swap out everything else. I went with an Icarus precision grip module, L2D combat lighter slide and barrel, and then we've got a DPM system spring in here. I can't show you the nitty-gritty details on this stuff here on YouTube, so you have to see it over at GBGunsDepot.com. However, today what I do want to show you is I'm going to run this thing through our standard battery of tests and see how it runs, since nothing on here is factory, and that's something you should definitely do whenever you modify a firearm. So with that different slide weight and the DPM system spring in there, how's it going to run? I've got a Winchester White Box 115 grain, and I went with the strongest of the DPM springs. So let's cycle it, and how's this thing going to work for me? Ooh, taller sights, got to get used to that. From 20-ish yards, hitting a little bit low, but otherwise, man, that Winchester's dirty. Really controllable. Hopefully you guys will notice throughout this video what the recoil is like. Part of my intent in this build was to see how smooth I could make the classic compact. Adding weight that's non-reciprocating via the aluminum grip module, as well as better ergonomics. Got that double undercut on the trigger guard, etc. Removing weight that does reciprocate, so lighter slide and barrel. That's what those speed holes are for. And then the DPM system, spring system in there. So far, I'm liking it. Full magazine plus one is where we test a number of things. We want to see how's the gun run fully stuffed, highest stress in the magazine, most friction against the slide. We also want to see how controllable the gun is, because I try to just burn down the target. Don't always hit, but I'm trying to race the trigger and see what kind of control I get. Target cam is recording, so you guys should see. Sorry guys, it's been a long day and I've forgotten a few things already. Oh, started missing. So the gun runs. My misses seem to be low and right. That might be a sight thing with this. We'll find that out. Thanks to our patrons and Ammo Squared supporters, as well as a viewer who sent in that Underwood, we've got What's for Dinner Time. The intent of this test, and as I scroll along, you'll notice these bullets have different ogive locations, different overall length, different case material, projectile types and shapes, etc. And of course, greatly differing weights. We want to see, will it feed from side lock? Will it cycle another round of the same type? And does it generate side lock at the end? If you're curious about trying any of these loads yourself, check out the pinned comment for the article over at GBGunsDepot.com, where we can point you in the direction of where to find some of this stuff. In case some of you are wondering, Miss T was unable to make it today, so she'll have to do a quick take video with this thing later on, if she wants to. It's my build, so she may not be interested. First load in What's for Dinner is a new favorite of mine, the Liberty Ammunition Civil Defense 50 grain plus P. Like this stuff, I've got 18 rounds of it on my hip. It not only will perform really well, but the 18 rounds on my hip feel lighter and more comfortable than 50 rounds of other stuff does, just because it's such a light round. And despite it being plus P, surprisingly comfortable, this gun. Those DPM system springs use 3 different springs to progressively slow down the slide and then progressively accelerate it forward. I've also noticed that pistols equipped with it never bottom out. You don't get the slide slamming into the frame, which is a lot of your recoil. And as a result, the recoil impulse on this thing feels stretched. It's quite different. Next up is our viewer submission Underwood 68 grain plus P Extreme Defender. This is the solid copper screwdriver looking stuff. And so far I found it to be kind of spicy. Oh yeah. Pretty sure I'm seeing the top of my slide. But the recoil is still comfortable. It's just flipping a lot. Next is Heavy Shot 100 grain. This is a frangible lead-free bullet. These guys were an Oregon company, recently purchased by Federal. Smells a bit like cinnamon. We did not get slide lock with that, so that might have been too soft for this spring setup. With these DPM springs, they usually come with 3 different springs, and you choose the strength of spring depending on the load you're expecting to run. I went with the heaviest spring. Another factor in choosing that spring is how firm your wrist is. If you tend to limp wrist a little bit, you'll want to go with a softer spring. I have confidence in myself, so I went with the firm spring. If I went with the softer spring, I bet that Heavy Shot would run. Number 4 is Hornady's Critical Defense 115 grain. Pretty standard load. And it ran. Our last one on this side, number 5, is Wolf steel case ammunition. We use steel case ammunition because it and aluminum, when we've got it, is popular because it's cheap. Steel and aluminum cost less than brass. It's simple. However, there is greater friction between the rounds stacked in the magazine and going into and coming out of the chamber. Plus, they have different expansion and contraction rates than brass, so sometimes you get feeding or extraction issues with them. If you're wondering why you would want to care about this What's for Dinner test for what's essentially my personal build, well, it's a process that I suggest you go through with your own builds. And what we're really learning about here is the chambering that L2D Combat used in their barrel, as well as that DPM system spring. Number 6 is Federal Punch 124 grain. Not the premium version of the Punch, the regular version. Tends to be higher recoiling. I could feel that there was more punch there, but it was not uncomfortable in the hand. Big part of that too comes down to hand fitment to the gun. I found these Icarus precision grip modules to be very comfy. Next up is the Outdoor Master by Sierra 124 grain. Not the greatest energy for a 124 grain bullet, but that doesn't mean it doesn't perform in flesh. Very soft shooting in this gun and a nice grouping. Now we're moving into heavy for caliber with Federal Premium Law Enforcement Tactical HST 147 grain. Circle number 8. Once again, a little more recoil, but it's not jarring. I think a lot of that smells like cigarettes. I think a lot of that comes from the DPM system. I noticed in their AR system, because we've used that in the build as well, that you end up with higher initial bolt velocity, but then it slows down rapidly and ends up moving slower towards the end of its cycle, and then reversing all of that on the way back. So that could be where I'm getting a little bit of pop feel, but I'm not getting any jar on the wrist. Next we have Federal's Syntech 150 grain action pistol. This is the stuff that is formulated for competitors. So soft. Nice. And our last load, heaviest one, is 158 grain from PPU. It's their subsonic line. Meant usually for suppressor use, things like that, but it's fun in What's for Dinner. Big long bullet. very comfortable to shoot. So aside from the heavy shot potentially not locking the slide open, thing ran great. Next, let's try these L2D sights and trigger control over on the spinner. That is our Titan Great Outdoors 6-inch spinner target. We're back here at 13 yards from it. Use this for sights and trigger control testing. Don't worry, I'll leave you guys zoomed in. Because it's a small target that starts moving, and the more it moves, the more important timing a well-placed shot becomes. Not too bad. I did notice on paper I tended to have a little bit of a low right issue going on with the gun, and it looks like it hit me here. The L2D sights work for me. A little bit low and right was happening. I had to favor a little high and left as I realized it was still missing this distance. I noticed the same thing on the steel from 20 yards. Now this is a red dot ready slide. I might do that later on. However, the blacked out serrated rear and red fiber optic front, which you guys can hopefully see clearly there, did make it very easy to find my front sight post and stay on target. The trigger, of course, is a standard 320, nothing changed there, but I believe my build is working here. So less mass on top, more mass on the bottom, and a different recoil system. I was ready for my next shot pretty darn quickly. If anything, the trigger was holding me back more than finding my sights or staying on target. So the ergonomic improvements have worked, and the recoil system seems to be working. Now let's see if I can punch a group with this thing with 5 shots from 7 yards. 5 shots from 7 yards with that same Winchester white box. Had good luck with it so far, and we're aiming at a 1-inch square from 7 yards. Typically that square is the same width as the front sight post at this distance, which makes it a great sort of bullseye aiming. And I'm not going to favor, see if these sights really are a little off, or maybe it's just me. Looks like it was just me learning the gun. So how'd the fancy build turn out? It accomplished what I wanted, I'm pretty sure. Recoil control is good. The ergonomics are great. No soreness of the hand, despite shooting a compact, which sometimes that happens to me. My hands are just a little big for compacts. Accuracy is there, and it runs most loads, at least as currently set up. I'm sure with a looser spring, softer spring, it would eat that heavy shot just fine. Pretty cool setup. It's fun that Sig has made it so easy to swap things out thanks to their modular system. I am really curious to hear from you guys as to what your builds were and how they turned out, what you've tried. This particular combo was not cheap, but sure looks good and sure shoots good, and it's fun to have a compact that performs a little beyond its weight class. Thanks for watching.